Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, revisiting the NES Classic Edition 9 months and 20 days later. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, joined as always by my co-host Mark Mitchell. How's it going, Mark?
It's going great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeling good.
One thing that's really fun about when we record these is we sit across a table from each other.
Yeah.
So we can make deep, meaningful, connected eye contact.
It is almost literally the only time I do that with anyone during the week or the weekend. I don't know why I was so specific in that.
And we have loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah, no, many a meal in silence in front of the television. But yeah, there's something very intimate and focused about doing a podcast where you're like, this person is going to get my more or less undivided attention until we stop recording.
Right.
That really doesn't happen anywhere else.
No.
Like I have a computer in front of me, you have your phone in front of you, but we're not like checking other stuff. Only if it's germane to this conversation. And this conversation, Mark, is about the NES Classic Edition and how we feel about it now.
That's right. So, with the SNES Classic Edition coming out in a couple of weeks, about a month from now, actually, a little less than a month at this point.
Yep, because it is almost September. Yeah, so it's, a month from 2 days ago is how that works out.
Yes. That's right. The 29th.
Because you're listening to this the day it comes out.
Of course, yes, absolutely. We don't do that enough on this portion of the show, on the Thursday portion of the show.
We get confused. So for the most part, we record both parts of a week's episode. Does that make sense? No. We record the Tuesday and Thursday episodes on Monday, usually.
That's right.
So we can't do the math in our head to be like, oh, when will Thursday? 3 whole days from now. We can't figure it out.
That's neither here nor there.
Right.
The important thing is that we're knuckleheads.
Right.
And the second important thing is that with the SNES Classic Edition coming out, we thought it would be a fun time to revisit the NES Classic Edition.
Right.
Which both you and I were able to get our hands on one last year when it released.
Day one.
And, we did an episode about it way back then, last November, early December.
Episode 6 of the show.
And so, we were a little younger then, a little more naive. But
I was still in diapers.
I had not yet graduated to cigarettes. And
we both had all of our baby teeth still.
But, I don't know. I have not really utilized mine all that much in the time since then. I will occasionally turn it on to play some Mario, but we thought it would be a fun time to go back and kind of reevaluate it.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe nice to reevaluate it removed from the hype surrounding it. And it's a little bit hard because there's hype surrounding the Super NES Classic right now, but I think it feels less like a precious artifact that I was able to, rescue before the Nazis could throw it into a fire with all the books that they're burning, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's the perfect metaphor.
Thank you. and now it's more like, just a machine that can play some cool games.
Right. And I don't want to interrupt this conversation, but I do want to just do a sidebar real fast.
Yeah, all right. Hey,
just
let's go into the sidebar.
I want to do a clarification just in case my mom is listening to this episode that I don't actually smoke cigarettes. I was grasping for something that adults would do. And that's the one that I came up with.
Okay, and then I just want to do a little sidebar on the side of this.
Great.
I recognized as we were doing it that you were doing something that adults would do, and I was doing something that babies no longer do. And so our patterns didn't quite match up.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're doing this on the fly. I heard it.
Right. Yeah, we're doing it on the fly. Mistakes will be made. We'll get out of this sidebar and then out of your sidebar.
Back to our main topic.
Back to the main topic, the NES Classic Edition, and how we feel about it now. So, Mark, you mentioned that you have not really had opportunity to play it in the months since it came out, with the exception of some Mario. You said you turn it on to play Mario every now and then. What does that look like for you? Like how often do you play Mario? What is playing Mario for you?
I feel like every couple of months, I, just get the urge to play some classic Mario. And
The
for me,
itch.
that's mostly Super Mario Brothers 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that I return to. It's the one that I have the best memories of and probably played the most as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the NES Classic Edition has been a very easy way. It's already plugged into my TV. Just like turn it on, play through a few levels. I usually will start from the beginning, and sometimes I'll use the warp whistles to
Mm-hmm.
advance myself further if I want to. But I don't know. There's something very. It's like my happy place.
Sure.
Like a very comfort food type thing.
It's coming home.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
just pick up the SNES and pick up the NES Classic Edition and just run through that because there were 30 games on the NES Classic Edition
Mm-hmm.
and most of them I don't care enough about to replay regularly.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that kind of struck me as we turn the system on to kind of play with it again this weekend. That there's a little bit like a story of there's so much evolution apparent in the NES's library, right? And we see so much of that on the NES Classic. So like while there are games like Zelda and Zelda 2 and Mario 3 and like Star Tropics and even Final Fantasy, these bigger experiences with like huge worlds that you can sink a lot of time into, there are also these like single screen games like Donkey Kong or like Balloon Fight, all of these games that feel so much smaller and so much more limited. And I feel like we've moved so far from those kind of arcadey experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't like return to the NES Classic Edition more often
Hmm.
is because we've talked about before I don't have any affinity for arcade games. I
Yeah.
don't particularly like score chase games and just based on when the Nintendo Entertainment System was originally released in the 80s that like was mostly what was on it originally
Yeah.
was versions of arcade games. And so a
Yeah.
lot of those like there's like what is it like Galaga and Galaxia and even Blue Find, which we played a lot of or not a lot of, we played a little bit of and I enjoy more than Joust, which it seems to basically be based on.
Hmm.
Like we played for a few minutes and I had my fill. And it was even that way with Donkey Kong.
Right.
Where it was just like, yeah, I've done enough of this.
Yeah, but they're solid experiences
They're
too.
not, for the most part, they're not bad games. There's a couple of real stinkers on the NES Classic Edition.
Sure.
Like,
So what do you view as like the that are still stinkers from this, even as we revisit it?
Ghost and Goblins.
Yeah.
Like,
Bad port.
it's a terrible port of a mediocre game.
Right.
Um,
Punishing difficulty. Like unfair difficulty.
yeah,
Right?
absolutely. I think Castlevania 2 is
It's too
not
broken.
very much fun to play.
It's broken. I mean, it needs a remake just like Metroid 2 did.
I mean, I don't even think Excite Bike is very fun to play anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I can appreciate its place in history, but I don't have any desire to play it. Let's see, there's Galaga, Gradius, which are just not bad games, but games that are
Right. That fits more in that like arcadey kind of genre, like we were talking about. You and I spent some time playing Super C, which is the Contra game that's on there. I think I just don't like Contra games. Is that or is this a bad game?
I don't know. I don't feel like I've played enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Contra game on the SNES Classic Edition, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what that is like because it'll be a more grown up, more refined version.
I think it's going to be the exact same thing.
I think Contra is Contra.
Yeah.
But we also played some Double Dragon 2 The Revenge.
Okay, so Double Dragon 2 The Revenge, I actually had fun playing until we hit a wall.
Me too.
So Double Dragon is Double Dragon, right? You are Billy and Jimmy Lee beating up bad guys. One button is punch left, the other button is punch right, and you can push both buttons at the same time to jump. And where the game really starts to fail, right, is when it makes you do platforming with this ridiculous jump button, which is you jamming both buttons at the same time.
And the jump physics aren't
Oh, they're terrible.
they're not fun.
They're real bad.
You especially when you play some Mario and then you jump back to other games and their platforming mechanics, especially their jump mechanics. Mario does a thing that doesn't exist in physics where you can jump forward and then push back on the D-pad and he will kind of swing backwards.
Yeah, you can adjust your jumps midair.
You can't do that in a lot of these early platformers, especially, and Double Dragon 2 is one of them, and it feels wrong.
It does feel wrong.
Even though it is more like correct, it in games it makes it broken.
Right. So, I mean, one of the things that you just sort of have to contend with when you're any kind of platforming game is that your character has the ability to jump further and higher than any human being ever could with a running start or without, right? And Mario's like, yeah, you can jump really high and really far, so you can sort of control it when you're in the air. But like when you're Billy and Jimmy Lee trying to like hop a pit, they're still jumping. They've got a vertical leap of like 8 feet, right? It's already unrealistic, and then you've got no control over it. I feel like that's part of why we buy into the sort of not realistic being able to navigate in the air, because you're already doing something fantastical, right? What do you think? What game do you think has the worst jump in this list?
Oh man,
Because Double Dragon's a good candidate for that. Arguably, Castlevania's jump is real bad.
yeah, Castlevania's jump is real bad. I'm gonna go back to Ghosts and Goblins.
Oh, I didn't find that jump to be that tough. I think you actually do get a little bit of control in the air. I think the worst jump in here is Ice Climber.
Now, see, that's interesting because I didn't hate it. I wasn't good at it,
No.
but I didn't hate it. I actually kind of thought Ice Climbers was fun.
Yeah.
As a small bite-sized experience that we could play for like a couple minutes, I would much rather play that than Galaxia,
Yeah,
or
sure.
whatever. Not to keep dumping
to
on
keep
that
harping on
specific
those.
game. One thing I do want to say about Double Dragon 2 before we move on too far is one thing that I did think was cool was the variation in the levels, like where they take place. And for a Nintendo game, for an NES game, they have some pretty cool mechanics, like the one where you're fighting in a helicopter and the door will occasionally swing open and then it'll suck you or enemies out.
Right.
Like that I thought that was really neat. I guess my memory of a lot of these NES games is vague enough that I don't remember them having these like mechanics like that.
Yeah.
I also thought the level that we gave up on, which was some like I can't remember what it was called, but it was like
It's
a haunted manor,
oh,
like
yes. It was the Mansion of Terror.
a
Or
Mansion
something.
of Terror. Like that name is so evocative, right? Like that was awesome.
Well, and the storytelling in Double Dragon 2: The Revenge is so delightfully cheesy. Like, and some of the writing, Mark, you pointed this out as we were playing, like is kind of good.
Yeah.
Like, it's not smart. It's a blunt instrument, but like it's a, like you say, evocative of something bigger or more like emotional.
Also, where the writing was good in a game I had not played that much of was Punch Out.
Yeah. Yeah, the writing and really just the presentation all over in Punch Out, kind of amazing, right? That like all of the characters have so much personality. Let's talk a little bit about Punch Out, because I think both you and I are, neither of us cut our teeth on Punch Out. We didn't play this game as kids, right?
Right.
And I think so much of Punch Out is, the experience of it is like learning the other boxers' patterns and knowing how to counterattack when they attack you. And both you and I were like too impatient when we started with it. And we're just like, I just want to punch, which gives you success for a little bit, but like you really need to work at understanding each character. And like as an adult, it's, and maybe this is me making excuses, right? But I feel like it's hard for me to commit a new like character's pattern to memory, and fight that. Whereas if I was a kid, I would have been more excited to like, write down like, oh, when he does this, dodge this way. When he does this, dodge this way. Or would have just been like more inherently excited about the characters. Um, but we, kind of drilled down into it. Not super hard. We didn't get anywhere near beating the game, but just like got to the point where we were understanding how the game expected us to interact with it. Um, and I think the game is so colorful and the music is so good and everything has such a distinct personality that it invites you to drill down into it.
Yeah, like in between rounds,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, the fighters have various things that they'll say. Like it's not like they repeat the same thing over and over. They
Yeah.
have different little like dialogue each time.
Right. And
Um,
and sometimes they're like giving away a weakness and sometimes it's just personality.
yeah, and like Doc will help you. That's the name of the
Yeah, I
his
think that's
trainer,
right.
right? Like he will help you out and he'll like give you hints on how you can better fight
Mm-hmm.
each individual fighter. Each individual fighter has like such personality
Yeah.
that yeah, it's a game that I didn't experience as a kid and had never really played before until we played it. And even though it's not a game that I will probably return much to because again, like I don't have the patience for that. For like hitting that wall
Yeah.
and having to really like figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I don't really like it kind of reminded me of ARMS in a lot of ways where it's just like I don't really want to learn how to do this. Even though it's actually even though I admire the presentation, I admire the craft,
Uh-huh.
I didn't have fun doing it.
So I am like compelled to go back to it. But I think I'm gonna save that compulsion for Super Punch Out. Yeah. Which is, has as good a reputation as the original Punch Out.
I'd say better.
Yeah, or better, sure.
Well, and I feel like that is the story of so many games going from the
Yes.
NES Classic Edition to the SNES Classic Edition. And, you know, there are some stone cold classics on the NES Classic Edition.
For sure.
Like, no doubt. Like, I think that Super Mario Brothers 3, I enjoy returning to more than Super Mario World. Like A Legend of Zelda, it's a great game, obviously. Castlevania, it's a great game. But the leap from those games to
their
their
Super Nintendo,
iterations
yeah.
on the Super Nintendo is so great that for a lot of these, what I'm realizing is what I really wanted was the Super Nintendo version to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something appealing about having so many of these games available. Like 30 games is a lot, right? And if you want to just like sit around and mess around with NES Classic Edition, you can find new game experiences, even if you're spending 2 minutes in each one, that will entertain you for an hour.
We spent an entire day playing together the NES
Yeah.
Classic Edition, and we could have kept playing so much more. There was so much that we didn't even touch.
Yeah. Also, fun weird side note. I've got a long HDMI a long HDMI cable for my NES Classic Edition, right? And I use that to just pull it over to the couch, so we are within arm's reach of the reset button, and also because the controller cords are short. But that means that I need to find a solution for plugging it in, and I have an Anchor, whatever, however it's pronounced, battery that I use to charge my Switch when I'm traveling, that I just plugged directly into this thing. So the whole thing was just running on portable battery power the whole time. And we had it going for maybe 6 hours on Saturday. And then I played a little bit on Sunday and again today. And the battery is still showing full. So the NES Classic Edition draws no power is my point there. But yeah, we sunk a whole afternoon into this thing, and it was by mixing big experiences with little experiences, right? One of the things that we sort of broke the seal on, that I hadn't turned on at all, was the original Final Fantasy. The original Final Fantasy, obviously an enormous game, right? Hugely important for the company Squaresoft that would become Square Enix. but also just a very long and involved, deep game. Um, and that was one of the reasons that I hadn't turned it on before. Was I was like, I don't want to, commit to spending hours upon hours with this little machine. I want to treat it more as like a party favor. But I don't know, what did you think? What was your experience with Final Fantasy as we were playing it on Saturday?
Even I was surprised at how fully formed a Final Fantasy experience it is.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, there's a lot of things that would be embellished and improved on later, and I'm really looking forward to playing Final Fantasy 3, also known as Final Fantasy 6, on the Super Nintendo Classic.
That game is so good.
But I don't think I really realized I had played a little bit of Final Fantasy, the original, before, not when it was released, but many years later, probably, I guess, like 10 years ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't dive into it very much because at that point, I was still experiencing some older Final Fantasy. You know, like I hadn't played 9 at that point.
Sure.
And so what I needed that more refined, Final Fantasy experience that the more modern games gave me. And Final Fantasy, the original on the NES, felt too opaque. It felt too difficult. But coming back to it and playing it with you, and you had played a little bit before, so maybe all of it before, but you had like some idea of what we should be doing, and that made it much more approachable and much more fun. And so I could actually appreciate how well crafted a game it is, especially for being the first Final Fantasy.
Yeah, well, and you pointed out something as we were playing too, that for being as Final Fantasy as the game already is, it feels almost like D&D in a way that, like, when you level up your characters, each level seems like a huge improvement, And I feel like that's something that when you're playing D&D, you do actually experience, where you're like, oh, I just doubled my hit points now, or I can deal so much more damage than I used to be able to do in just the previous level. And that's not the case in like Final Fantasies 2 and 3 and 7, 8, 9.
Right.
And also that there are no magic points. You have spell slots, so you can cast like 4 level 1 spells before,
which is very nakedly tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe if they were cribbing this from like Ultima or something like that, which definitely pulled from tabletop RPGs.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you can easily see the skeleton.
Yeah, for sure.
D&D in there. But also the sprite work is beautiful.
Yeah, totally beautiful. Yeah, we were marveling at some of like the backgrounds in the like during a battle sequence. That obviously there are only so many pixels that you have to evoke a desert, a swamp, a cave, or whatever. But they're like the textures are just so great and so simple. And we were also we played through the sort of the game starts by giving you a mission to rescue a princess, right? And it's like a cold open, right? You pick your characters, you name them, and then you march them off, and it maybe takes you an hour to get through this thing, but then you cross the bridge, and that's kind of when the game starts its like title sequence. Which is a cool, like, dramatic little thing, like the thought that like a game can be something more than like, here's your start screen, you select 1 player, 2 player by hitting select and then start and then play the game. Yeah, I it was cool and very effective for me, like revisiting this game. And I've played it, I've gone back to it now since Saturday. I haven't turned the thing back on for any other games, but I have gone back to Final Fantasy. I want to keep growing these characters, and I want to save up and get that silver sword, and I want to level up our black belt to a level where I can take his weapons away and he can start dealing more damage with fists. I do think the game is super opaque. But the second that you and I were both on our phones to be like, okay, who can use what weapons and what are good strategies for developing these characters, then it started to feel like something fun to work towards.
We were also operating without a manual.
Yeah, yes.
Which I assume would explain most of what's going on. Or at least some of what's going on.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows, man?
And so it was fun to balance, like, we put I think 3 hours into Final Fantasy, and then to jump and go do something like Donkey Kong Jr., which I had never played before.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was really fun because we were playing it, and we were playing in 2-player mode, so we would alternate back and forth. Patrick's much better at it than I am, and so I think
I like the Donkey Kong games. Yeah.
So, but like, so we were just marveling at like, oh wait, is this where they got that for Donkey Kong Country 2 or
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country?
Yes. Or yeah. No, but I think too specifically that when in Donkey Kong Jr., when you're climbing up a rope and you can have you're either sprawled out, sprawled. What am I saying? Either Donkey Kong is holding on to 2 ropes, one with his left arm and one with his right.
Yeah, both arms extended.
Right. He climbs up faster when he's like that, and down faster when he's just on 1 rope, which is just like a dumb, simple, just way to manage his speed. And we see that in Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest. And you can hear about our playthrough in our Classic Edition.
Well, and because we had just played through it fairly recently, like when Mario was releasing the little like crocodile enemies.
Yeah, these little chompy guys.
Yeah, that go back and forth and they go down the vines.
Mm-hmm. This is in the first level of
Donkey Kong Jr. And you're just like, oh, I wonder if this is where the inspiration for those enemy types in Donkey Kong Country came from.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, just what are they called? Kremlings in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is cool. And it's the kind of stuff that always makes me wonder, like, well, why was this part discarded, right? Like, in Donkey Kong Jr., the last level, you're like pushing these keys up into a platform that will release Donkey Kong, and these birds fly down at you. But like, you never see birds like that in Donkey Kong Country. I guess, maybe I'm going to go back on that. They're borderline like the vultures.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's very cool for me to see that kind of the building blocks of what we see later in these franchises.
And of course, we also put time into the Mario games.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to, right? So because they're just so good. So we played the original Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 3. And our goal with Super Mario Brothers was to play it as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Well, that was the goal. We didn't finish it.
No, we got to 8. We got to Bowser's Castle.
Yeah, we got to 8-3.
Yeah, and then but we just gave up
Fell in
because
some
it
lava.
wasn't that fun.
Yeah, we weren't having that much fun.
The original Super Mario Brothers is a great game, still a great game, but it has been succeeded in every way possible by much better games.
Yes.
That it's not that fun to go back to, except for nostalgic reasons.
Either nostalgic reasons or there's such like a big speedrunning community around that game that like, I don't know, it does feel like a little bit of a show-off game that like if I put in some time and like wanted to just be like, oh, hey, remember Mario? Bam, 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 but like I've got no interest in that at this point. So for us, I think Super Mario Brothers 3 was really where that's where we mentioned it already earlier in the episode, but we played that game for maybe hour and a half, 2 hours on Saturday. Played from the beginning to the end, did some warping to skip levels we didn't want to play, but like the 2-player mode on that is so good. It's simple. You trade off levels. But you can mess with each other in little Mario Brothers inspired mini games. Yeah, and it's just I don't know. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to articulate what it is that's so special about Mario 3 and its 2-player mode specifically.
And I think some of it, which you have mentioned before, is that Super Mario Brothers 3 is so much like the payoff for the promise that was Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it's amazing that it's on the same hardware.
Yeah.
You
for
know?
sure. Mm-hmm.
Because it's such a mature game for coming out only a few years later.
Yeah.
Than Super Mario Brothers.
Well, and it is arguably not even the same hardware because the NES carts for Super Mario Brothers 3 had extra hardware in them so that levels could scroll vertically and horizontally at the same time. So it is like technically different hardware. Also, man, that's so crazy that like games used to have different stuff in them, like different physical stuff in them to make it achieve something that an earlier cartridge couldn't do. Which is something that we're going to see in the Super NES Classic with the FX chip, which is what allowed it to do the polygons for Star Fox and obviously Star Fox 2, and for some of the effects in Yoshi's Island. That was all like hardware built into the cartridges. This is a pointless little bits of information, but
So
interesting to me.
we were very lucky. There are a lot of people who wanted NES Classic Editions
Mhm.
and who were not able to get them, and or who rightfully don't want to pay like the prices that they're going for now.
Sure. I mean, I was looking at them on eBay. They're reselling for like $225 at the moment.
So, do you think for somebody who wasn't able to get one that they are like a necessary item? Like, do you think it's something that you would tell somebody, yeah, pay whatever you can to get it? Or do you think that most of these games are available officially through Virtual Console
Mm-hmm.
on many Nintendo platforms? They're unofficially available everywhere.
Right. On your phone.
Yeah.
So I mean, no, the answer is no. It's not unnecessary, but like it is more or less like the definitive way to experience these games now, right? There is no other way that like replicates the feeling of having an NES controller in your hand the way this does, right? It is literally the exact same size and shape and weight of an NES controller. And anything that you're going to get that's like approximating that now is going to have like an extra set of buttons or like triggers or bumpers or be wireless or something.
And there are really nice, basically like new consoles that if you own cartridges, you can plug into, and they have HDMI and all
Yeah,
that
like a
kind of stuff.
Retron or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and so in a lot of ways, if you're a hardcore collector, you know, that's an ideal way to play it. But for most people like you and I, like we don't own
Mhm.
cartridges anymore. We would have to go
Right.
seek that out. And
I do have a bunch of Super Nintendo cartridges, including Beethoven Ultimate K9 Caper.
the details of which, if you haven't heard yet, you can listen to on
All right.
Tuesday's episode.
Right, or you could just go to our Facebook page and watch my. I streamed the first level of the game.
That's right.
It's terrible. What point were you driving at? Oh, that there are other options if you want to play these games and you do have cartridges, or if you want to just like steal it. I guess at this point.
Yeah, I mean, but to your point, I agree that for somebody like me who hasn't invested in very many virtual console games and who isn't a collector, it is a great way to do it, but it is not the only. It's not the only way.
It's not the only way. Yeah.
I would not recommend somebody pay hundreds of dollars for it.
No, definitely not.
I think it's fun. I think it's cute, but I don't think it's worth that.
So here's something that is worth pointing out. Because we both have these systems, Mark was able to bring his controller over to my house, which means we had two NES controllers. If Mark's not here, I can play have a second player with my old Wii Classic controller, which is kind of shaped more like a Super Nintendo controller and has like thumbsticks on it.
It's not very comfortable.
It's not a very comfortable controller. Also, it's got that weird Wii finish on it, so it like collects, dead skin. Like it's gross. It has bad form function, right? But the extra NES Classic Edition controllers are so rare. They made so far fewer of those than they did of the systems. So like if you thought it was hard to get a system, getting the extra controller is virtually impossible. So without being able to have both of those controllers, it seems like the experience is worth a little bit less. Because we played a bunch of 2-player games on Saturday. We played Double Dragon, we played Super C, Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, Super Mario Brothers 3, like I was saying before. And if it's not super easy or like super in line with the console's aesthetic to just pick it up and do it, it loses something.
Yeah, I totally agree. Although I had so much fun doing this co-op or playing on the couch, with you
Yeah.
next to me, some of these old games, some of them were co-op, some of them that weren't, that it did make me understand the appeal of what Nintendo has promised for the Switch online service, which is going to be like NES games that have some sort of online functionality.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means leaderboards. I don't know if it means that, uh we would be able to play like Tetris against each other.
Yeah.
But for me, the idea of both of us being able to start up our Switches and play through some like Double Dragon 2 in co-op, but all over the internet.
Yeah.
Like that's a fun idea to me. If we were able to play Super Mario Brothers 3 in that 2-player mode, switching back and forth, but also be on voice chat and just,
that'd be so cool.
it'd be
Also,
so much fun.
Super Mario Brothers 3 is just passive enough of that. I mean, this would be super cool, right? If it was just like you played your level and then like I got an alert that like it was time for me to go, And
Yeah, almost like asynchronous multiplayer.
yeah, or like playing chess via mail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I I'm excited for the potential for all of this old software as it gets reincorporated into what Nintendo is now. And I hope that these classic edition systems are cool, but I hope that's not where it ends, Like I don't think we don't need like a gussied up presentation of these old games as badly as we do like a way to play them on the systems we're already playing games on. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Cuz like yeah, just to make Super Nintendo games available on the Switch with online functionality or with just modern, gaming functionality would be great. And that you got me excited about that. This is another thing that we were talking about. So the Super NES Classic Edition comes with 2 controllers. So we won't have that problem of not being able to find a second. But then, can we use those controllers on the NES Classic?
Yeah, unknown. I mean, it only if
They use the same port.
they use the same ports, but they may not like read each other.
Yeah, I mean, it will read the Wii Classic controller, which is pretty similar to the Super NES controller.
Yeah, so maybe it will. Maybe you will be able to use, because the SNES controller is vast improvement over the NES controller, even in just like ergonomics.
Yeah, I mean, the NES controller has those like really hard, right angle corners that dig into your hand after a long play session. But there's no replicating that uncomfortable feeling, like everyone else has fixed it, so you don't experience that anymore. And if I'm trying to chase a very specific sensation from my childhood, I need an uncomfortable controller.
And that's where the NES Classic Edition, I think, succeeds the most, is replicating that childhood feeling that, you don't get from playing Super Mario Brothers 3 on a 3DS, that you don't get from booting up your Wii Virtual Console.
Right, or having it available on your Switch, like we were just saying. We messed around just a little bit with the screen options. There aren't very many of them, but I think that's okay, right? Like on the Neo Geo arcade classics on Switch, you can kind of fine tune that stuff to how like scan lines and any like color warping or fading or whatever. The NES Classic Edition just really has 3 options, right? One that's like an optimized 4x3, one that's pixel perfect, and another one that's what is it called?
It's like CRT
Yeah.
something. It fakes the scan lines.
Yeah. And we set it on the CRT mode for a little bit. But I think ultimately like the system's base settings um are fine. And all of the sprite work is just so like beautiful and simple that seeing it clear and not with any of that CRT kind of what's the word I want to use here? I was gonna say disturbance, but that's not right. Distortion. That you don't really need it. I wonder if that'll be different on Super Nintendo. Like if having a little bit more detail does make me want to have a little bit of distortion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
It will in fact be interesting to see. So one thing I think that the last piece of is the NES Classic Edition like worth it, or like what's the functionality for it? Is the sort of hypothetical scenario of like you have it on at a party and people just pick it up, and it goes through the various attract screens for all these games, and someone can just pick it up and say, oh, I want to play Balloon Fight, I want to play Bubble Bobble, I want to play Castlevania. Let's go through them alphabetically. I've never had the system in that scenario. And I know I've had people over since I got it. It just doesn't occur to me to do it. Can you see yourself using it in that way?
Yeah, I feel like these games, even more so than for our generation anyways,
Mhm.
even more so than the Super Nintendo, were video games for so many people
Yeah.
that even if somebody wasn't a huge gamer, or like they had an older brother or sister who played but they were too young for it, just visually they are so evocative of childhood
Yeah.
for so many people our age that I think people would absolutely be attracted to it and want to pick it up and play
Yeah.
a little bit, just experience that again.
Right. Well, and as we were saying, so many of these experiences are those pick it up, play it for 5 minutes, and then move on, let
Ye-
someone else play.
Yeah, which is really a strength that as these systems get more mature, like the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, hypothetical N64 Classic Edition will not have that because games aren't designed in that. Even Super Mario World, the levels are too long for that sort of like pick up and play
Yeah.
mentality.
But I mean, if you're at a party and someone's like play a level of Mario 3 and then like go back to drinking, like, yeah. Yeah.
But not smoking, Mom.
No, Mom, we're not smoking. All right, Mark, let's close the door on the NES Classic Edition. I mean, that's closing the door for us. We would love to hear how you've been using your Classic Edition system since it came out. Are you able to play it at parties? Are there games that you've gotten lost in that you didn't expect to? And how about that Final Fantasy, huh?
And if you weren't able to get your hands on one, is this something that you still want, or have have you moved on? I know sometimes I get like so excited for a product release, and then once it's out there and
Yeah.
I don't get one, I don't care anymore. You just move on
Right.
to the next thing that will guarantee your happiness.
Right. One of these things, look, a lot of these things will guarantee
We'll
your
get
happiness.
there eventually.
One of these things will make us happy for sure. So you
and
should
then
just
the show will end.
because the show is just another thing we're trying to achieve happiness with. Yeah. So if any of your experiences with this machine, either having it or not having it, please write into Nintendo Cartridge Society
At gmail.com.
And on that note, we didn't get any emails about our Sonic Mania discussion, but just getting some feedback from people on Facebook. That some people thought we were maybe too hard on the Sonic franchise as a whole. That we kind of based our Sonic Mania discussion around the idea that Sonic hasn't succeeded in years, and that this is like a return to form or something for the series. And a lot of people are saying like, hey, with the exception of like Sonic Unleashed and like Sonic Knights and Sonic 06, all the Sonic games are fine. I guess guilty as charged. I didn't play Sonic Colors. I didn't play Generations. There's a lot of those games I just let slip by.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe we should play Sonic Forces if it reviews well, because I, for the longest time, didn't think I enjoyed Sonic. I've been really enjoying Sonic Mania. I still don't think I'd enjoy Sonic 3D, but maybe I would.
Yeah, maybe you would. What does a modern Sonic game look like? Dude, we just need everything else to catch up to it. Maybe. I mean, Sonic Boom is supposed to be bad, so we won't pick up those. But yeah, I'm more open to the idea that Forces doesn't have to be the garbage fire that we were expecting it to be. But if you have any further thoughts about Sonic Mania or Sonic as a franchise and how we've been too mean to it, you can write to us, of course, Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. Remember, you can rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. I said you can, but we would like it if you would. Share the episode if you liked it on Facebook or Twitter. On Twitter, we are at NinCart Society. On Facebook, we are just Nintendo Cartridge Society. If you like Mark and Mine's opinions, we write about comic books on retconpunch.com. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can check out more of his music on 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying we're sorry for being so mean to Sonic. Thanks for listening.
What's a Creative Podcast Network?